Hello all, it's been a while. Wow, has it? This is a continuation of the Mortal Kombat series I started a year ago, back when I had my old computer, which is now no longer among the living, an ex-computer, however you want to put it. Since I've gotten a new one and a better mic, I thought I'd finish that up before I started continuing with this game-based series. So, a little bit of a refresher, this analysis of Mortal Kombat focuses on the story itself, how fighting game stories work, what makes for a good fighting game story, what makes for a bad one, and how Mortal Kombat 9 is put together in that regard. This also involves some summary, I admit. As we go through the story, I'm going to be mentioning what happens as I critique it and try and look at how it functions. Again, if you want to look at how this is going to go, just check the previous episode out. It will give you the model. Anyway, moving on now, we are entering into the part of Mortal Kombat 9 that focuses on the story of Mortal Kombat II, which was the first one of the Mortal Kombat games I owned on Super Nintendo, so it has a special place in my heart, and Kintaro holds a special place of frustration. I had no problem with Shao Kahn, it was Kintaro that I despised, but I eventually got past him. I still haven't gotten past the old wounds there. Part 2 opens with yet another mortal who is not necessarily that familiar with the Mortal Kombat universe, in part so we can explain some things to him, but also because he is related to the subplot that's going to dominate this chapter, which is related to Sonya's chapter. It's the reverse of hers. Instead of Sonya going to rescue Jax, he's going to end up rescuing her, and that will be his subplot. I like the parallel there, and that's sadly one of the only good things about this chapter is how it parallels that chapter 2 from the Mortal Kombat 1 segment. And unfortunately, this one also manages to carry with it how much chapter 2 did not work. The opening works fine to an extent. We get that little celebration of, hey, we are victors, Outworld's defeated. Well, then the Outworld portals open up, and we see one of the first advantages that Outworld would have in a war with Earth. Yes, Earth has technology, but Outworld has magic, which means it can open entryways wherever it needs to, and its soldiers can get behind a lot of our defenses. This also nullifies many of our technological advantages like airstrikes and missiles because they can pop up and then retreat very quickly, and what are you going to bomb in return? We don't even have direct access to Outworld except through magical portals. So this is a distinct advantage. Unfortunately, we kind of crush this idea that Outworld is a dangerous superpower right away because Jax wades right in there and just starts knocking those Tarkatans left and right. What's more, and what's sillier, the Tarkatans don't swarm him, they stop to fight him one at a time while the rest just rush past. Why? Why on earth? This defeats the purpose of having support on the battlefield. This is not a pre-Bronze Age culture. They should have some notion of how to support fellow combatants. This is not a tournament that is one-on-one. This is war. And if you find yourself fighting unsupported in war, something has gone horribly, horribly wrong. It reminds me of that Game of Thrones fight scene with Sir Arthur Dayne, where they're trying to establish him as a badass, and he lets people surround him while twirling his swords, and then they attack him one at a time, just politely not coming at his back until he's ready to turn around and counter the attack. No. Oh my goodness. Now I know the idea in the scene is to establish Jax as a badass because he spent most of the last game as a person in distress. You have to build him back up since this is going to be his chapter. However, couldn't we have just built him back up through the events of the chapter? That would be nice. No need to make a whole invading army look non-threatening. This is just one U.S. soldier, admittedly a Special Forces soldier, but really Special Forces are soldiers just trained to fight in special circumstances or to do tasks that are outside the acumen of the more common soldiers that populate the majority of the military. They're not superheroes, they're soldiers who have the skill set to accomplish specific jobs. So that doesn't necessarily make Jax, aha, I am all powerful, I will Rambo my way through this. although Rambo generally used surprise and stealth over brute force, so let's say Terminator my way through this. The Outworld invasion does not look very threatening because of this scene. Also brings up one of my least favorite tropes, the knockout punch, as eventually he's overwhelmed and someone knocks him out. Why? Why didn't they just finish him? I don't know. How did he stay out for so long without permanent brain damage? I don't know. There are multiple YouTubers and podcasts who have already talked about why the knockout trope and how Batman knocking out all of these people without any permanent effects or killing them is absolutely ridiculous. But okay, Mortal Kombat is the realm of the ridiculous, let's just go with it. And he wakes up, and we are presented with a new conundrum. The Tarkatans have retreated, but they've taken Sonya, and they've taken the Shaolin monks prisoner. And Shang Tsung has new demands. Demands delivered, admittedly, before the invasion happened. Hey, why don't we have one more Mortal Kombat tournament, but this one is for all time, you never have to go through this again. The pressure of the invasion was just to force Raiden into accepting it, which he does, considering they have the advantage of having won the last one and knowing conceivably the best warriors that Shao Kahn could bring to bear besides himself. So it would seem that they could do this just fine. This is complicated by the fact that Raiden is beginning to lose faith in his champion because of the visions, and he goes, okay, well, I tried to follow those visions exactly, and that didn't work, so now I'm going to try and go against the visions, see if that works, and Liu Kang, you must not win this, it must be someone else. So they're going in a bit hamstrung. They're losing their best fighter. And then we travel to Outworld. Now, I have to admit, Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn here are awesome, particularly with how calmly they take the Earthrealmers just strutting into their tournament. But we don't really get to see too much of them here. We have a fight where Jax accidentally volunteers himself, and then he beats up another Tarkatan, in this case Baraka. Baraka just jobs his way through this entire story, so there's really not much to say about him here. And again, you'll notice that no one demands a finish him moment. They just pause and go, oh, well, we have something to attend to, because Shang Tsung has to go off and meet with Kano about buying Earth weapons. The Earthrealmers are not assigned a guide, they are not given quarters, they are just left to their own devices. Why? I don't know. You'd think that it would be a good idea to keep watch on them to make sure they don't go messing up anything, which they always seem to do when they're left on their lonesome. But that's not how the bad guys roll. The bad guys just completely leave them be because that's what the story demands. So Raiden, Johnny Cage, and Jax, who are perhaps justifiably surprised by the fact that there is no hospitality here and no one watching them, just scamper off to go find Sonya. And here is where we have another of our really misplaced fight scenes. Was there a reason to have Johnny Cage fight with Jax here other than to have another fight? No. And this brings up the point I want to stress virtually all through this series on Mortal Kombat. The fights have to fit with the story. There needs to be a narrative reason for each battle. Stakes involved, some sort of consequence, and at the very least some sort of facsimile of reason behind it. I can perhaps make an argument for why Baraka was a good first fight in the chapter, because the Tarkatans were the ones that invaded, and the Tarkatans were the ones that kidnapped his partner. It is perhaps somewhat meaningful that he beats up a Tarkatan. Okay, well, I can get that. Why is he beating up Johnny Cage? Because Johnny Cage is at first concerned that Jax may be in a relationship with Sonya or want that, and then he starts going, wow, okay, if you're not in a relationship, maybe I should be. I will pursue that hot piece of what, you want to punch me? This is, I suppose, a good enough reason to beat the crap out of your partner while you're on a rescue mission, trying to be stealthy. Why not do this in an armory? This isn't dumb at all. And Jax is a disciplined soldier. I guarantee you he's hurt worse in the army, and I have to go rescue that porg right now because my dog is trying to eat a porg, a stuffed creature that belongs to my girlfriend. One moment. Porg has been rescued, and while I could edit that out, I'm just going to leave it in because it added urgency to my delivery at that moment. Why not? And it fit with the topic. We are dealing with rescue missions and stupid distractions, so that qualifies. But why would someone who has heard so much worse in the military be willing to attack one of his co-workers and perhaps cripple him before the tournament even gets to him, and just put the whole thing in jeopardy because I got offended for 5 seconds. No, it was dumb. It was a great way to force a fight between two good guys. And by great, I mean pulled right out of the ass of the writers. No. Absolutely no. It goes against all common sense. There are no stakes because it's between two good guys, neither of whom are hopefully going to try and kill each other, despite the fact in the gameplay you can do supers that involve breaking the spine of your opponent. It'll be fine. You're good. And because of this, Johnny Cage is in no condition to help when Jade shows up. Now, there is no reason why it needs to be Jade that shows up. This is, again, just another fight thrown in there. But the story does do an opportunity to drop a little ship tease and reference to Mortal Kombat Annihilation, though that is admittedly probably the last piece of Mortal Kombat media that you want to be referencing. Still, I suppose that offers some justification for it. You could have fit anyone else in there, maybe Kano, but Kano's selling stuff right now, so I can understand why you wouldn't want to use Kano again here. He's necessary somewhere else. But hey, if it were Jax that walked in on that arms deal, it would have some significance because he is an American soldier who's familiar with that weaponry and goes, oh my gosh, the Black Dragon who I've been working against this whole time and trying to stop from making arms deals, this is why I could never stop them. They're making arms deals with another world too. No wonder their resources seem limitless. This could have added dimension to the story. Instead, we just punch out Jade and move on. And this brings us to the boss fight of this chapter, which is Shiva. Again, there is no connection between Shiva and Jax. We do get some characterization of Shiva and how the Shokan work when she chides Sonya for trying to escape. This gives us some insight into their culture, so I will give Netherrealm bonus points for that. It serves some narrative purpose. But beyond that, it's just another fight, and Jax gets to rescue Sonya. Again, I think there's a missed opportunity here because they could have gotten involved in that whole arms smuggling story, or this could have been where Ermac shows up and they have Jax's arms ripped off in Jax's chapter with a big transformation in his life, rather than push that into Sub-Zero's story, and in a case where Sub-Zero has no real connection to the event. I don't know. Just seems like we'd want to end on a note where the narrative actually matters. But we've rescued Sonya, and we've brought ourselves pretty much back to the status quo where those two are concerned, so we get to jump now to the Lin Kuei back-to-back chapters. The first one focusing on human Smoke. They begin this chapter with some exposition explaining that Smoke is here with Sub-Zero to find out what happened to Sub-Zero's brother. And younger Sub-Zero at this point in time is called Tundra, but very quickly they give him Sub-Zero's code name, and they begin their quest splitting up with a terrible, terrible salute that should never, ever, ever appear in another Mortal Kombat game. If you want some sort of cool saying, look to Game of Thrones and go, how could I make something as awesome as winter is coming, not stealthy as the whatever. No, it does not work. It doesn't work at all. It's just corny, and I'm talking too corny for even Mortal Kombat. And that is some serious Illinois corn. Smoke is the first one to run afoul of any trouble. In this case, Katana has been tasked with guarding the tournament grounds in between matches, I assume, since she was present in the first tournament section and she's present in the later one. And while this fight would seem to have no narrative connection, it does set something up much later. So this fight sort of serves a sort of Chekhov's gun role. And there at least is a practical reason for them to fight, just like there was for the Shiva scene. Since Shiva is the jailer, she is an obvious person that Jax had to go through to get Sonya. There is a narrative plot-based reason for them to fight. There just doesn't seem to be anything deeper at first. There will be later, and it will serve additional narrative roles, and this is something I think that all fighting games should consider. Yes, you may be fighting someone to get past them, but there can be more narrative uses to any fight that someone has had before other than just that. You should do as many things as you can effectively do with every move. Maximum benefit for minimum expenditure of energy. Smoke then comes across the weapons deal with Kano that does give us some insight into what the Black Dragon's been doing and does show us how the Tarkatans are going to level the playing field, which are both narratively important. I just think it could have overall been handled better by Jax instead of Smoke. Still, Smoke is seeking out Shang Tsung, and there Shang Tsung is, and Smoke has a good reason for wanting to talk to Shang Tsung about some serious business, because Shang Tsung was the one that the previous Sub-Zero was working for. So he walks up, and we have another set of fights. These fights have some narrative significance in that it's all to get toward the goal of Smoke's quest. We also get to learn a bit more about Shang Tsung's rules, in that Shang Tsung can become people whose soul he didn't completely drain, or drain at all, and gain their powers, but he doesn't gain their skills, meaning he has a key weakness unless he completely takes everything from a person. So overall, this segment does some decent world building. Well, then we get our fights. We get our fight with Kano, which Smoke handles easily enough, and nothing really to write home about there. Kano has a reason to be there, and they have a reason to fight. It's just not that special beyond that and the world building, which I suppose is good enough for me. Then we have the 2-on-1 fight, and these are already very frustrating. But this one gets even worse from a narrative perspective, because not only do we have Reptile jobbing again, and somehow Reptile is going to get to the Coliseum and be okay again before Smoke gets there himself, but we also job out Shang Tsung before his big two-person fight scene that's going to be coming up later that is ultra important to the story. There was no reason to job them together. Just have one be present. Then, of course, we have the narrative boss of that chapter, which is Sector, and this fit nicely. I mean, from the get-go, you've got the old Lin Kuei versus the new Lin Kuei. You get a good look at what Sub-Zero and Smoke are running from. You have this first example of the Cyber Lin Kuei being the one who was most a machine himself, even before he was a machine, and who accepted it willingly. And what is more, he is the one hunting Smoke down like he's some sort of escaped animal. Then you have the fact that there is probably a long unseen history between these two, and it feels very much like that. Tack on top of this that we have not yet jobbed the new Sector. We did that with the old one. This is a new augmented one, and it's his first appearance. So he is suitably threatened. And this will be our first test of the new Lin Kuei versus their older models. Is there indeed an improvement? It's soul versus machine. It is skill versus mechanically augmented aptitude. This is the son of the current Grand Master against one of the rogues who has broken away from the Lin Kuei. It is a good time on virtually every level. Hit it. This is what a Mortal Kombat fight should be. And yes, Smoke wins, and it is thematically important. It is important to the character, and eventually we end this chapter with Smoke being rescued by Raiden and Johnny Cage because, well, he was going to be turned into a machine himself, just like Cyrax already unwillingly has been. And this makes the audience who is familiar with the old Mortal Kombat timeline more likely to go, oh, what's going to happen now? Because we never really got human Smoke for very long in the old games. We got Cyber Smoke, who is one of my favorites and my favorite of the Cyber Ninjas, but now we get to see history take a different path. So this is the first time the game delivers on a promise to change things in a measurable way that we can understand and will reverberate throughout the rest of the story. So solid points there. It was a overall good chapter. Then we move on to Sub-Zero, who begins sort of where the last chapter left off with a fight with Cyrax. Again, this is thematically wonderful, old versus new, but in this case it is also different. It's not just a repeat because Cyrax never wanted to be this cyber ninja, and we get to feel the tragedy of what's happened to him. And it's just overall a good start to that chapter. Unfortunately, we don't get to carry that very long because then we see Sub-Zero facing against Ermac. Why? No real reason other than Ermac is just there and Sub-Zero happened to find him. Yes, narratively it tells us that Ermac is regenerating, but couldn't we have just had that fight with smoke to fill time? Why did it have to be here? Why did it have to be anywhere in here? I don't know. We just know that Ermac is healing and is now powerful. Ermac does, however, have the distinction of being one of the only villains to still look nasty and powerful despite being jobbed everywhere, because he actually gets to beat some of the good guys when the player is not controlling them. He rips off Jax's arms here, setting up Jax's transformation, which is good. That means that there is some narrative stake to what happened. The narrative will now change from here. Also, very soon after, you will have Ermac beating up Johnny Cage to eliminate him from the tournament. So, Ermac looks solid. He, as far as I can tell, is the strongest of Shao Kahn's soldiers in terms of his victories against the Earthrealmers, until, of course, you have the Queen return. All hail the Queen. You also have Sub-Zero looking like kind of a douche here, and I don't think that was their intent, because he's like, oh, there's a portal over there, you can help him to it. Sub-Zero, take a few minutes. Help the guy. He's got no arms. You've got the time. Now, I suppose you could say that this is an example of him becoming vengeance-driven like Scorpion is, but the story doesn't treat it like that. Because after he beats Scorpion, there is no real vengeance that follows him throughout his story anymore, and it just... I don't know. I don't know why they couldn't have him help them back to the portal before he goes off and does his thing, thus giving him a pet the dog moment instead of a kick the dog moment, especially since we're supposed to sympathize with this guy for the rest of the flippin' chapter. Alright, that didn't really work too well. Well, he arrives in the arena and demands from Shao Kahn that he be allowed to face Scorpion. Now, Shao Kahn isn't really a guy who likes to give in to the gimme, gimme, gimmes, and he tests Sub-Zero for seemingly his own amusement against Reptile, who is somehow here having just fought Smoke somewhere else, and he's also well again. Okay, well, still, I suppose that that's going to work. We're going to job Reptile again, and Sub-Zero crushes him. Then we get the big fight, and there are plenty of narrative stakes present in this fight. This is a great boss battle that mirrors the last Sub-Zero versus Scorpion fight. But it's a different Sub-Zero, and you killed his brother. Well, your Sub-Zero killed my family. At least Scorpion thought so, and just thematically it works great. It is pretty much the cover image on the title screen, where you've got Sub-Zero and Scorpion fighting it out in the arena. It's a perfect way to end that chapter with a fight. And it is really from here that Scorpion becomes, at best, a bit player in the story, and to never really matter again in it. But this is a great way to take him out of the story as Sub-Zero defeats him. However, I don't really see what Sub-Zero gained from the fight. Yeah, he beat up Scorpion, but Scorpion's already Quan Chi's servant and will continue to be so. So he didn't really eliminate him or do much to change anything. So in that one area, I find fault in this final battle. It changed effectively nothing. However, what happens afterward changes everything, because Sub-Zero is taken by the Lin Kuei. And Raiden is right. They can't really do anything about it because that's right in front of Shao Kahn. Both Lin Kuei are there. All of Shao Kahn's warriors are there. And we also see the Lin Kuei swear service to Shao Kahn, effectively making them part of his army. And people who have a grounded, vested interest in Shao Kahn taking over Earthrealm, giving him yet another technologically advanced ally. So we can see Shao Kahn building up his army throughout all of this. Nice there. Overall, I think it's a solid chapter. This brings us to Kitana, who is already in some trouble because she spared someone's life at one point. And this is how the game and storytellers let us know who we're supposed to sympathize with and who we're not supposed to. She is somehow, in one fight with Liu Kang, begun to doubt her 10,000 years of history and bloodthirstiness as she almost spares a fighter before Shao Kahn kills him. She hesitates, and that's supposed to tell us she's becoming a good person. Anyway, Shao Kahn gets relatively pissed about that, and the fact that she let a ninja through, how she got back to the place so quickly after being beaten by Smoke, I don't know, but she also did. Maybe used one of those portals to get around. A lot of these people who are getting beaten up are getting right back afterwards and going, well, it's Tuesday. I actually wonder if Outworld has a 7-day week or if they have 24-hour days. I just don't know. what it's like in that world in that regard. That would be interesting information to have in some sort of unlockable item in the crypt sometime. Hey, Netherrealm, who runs the crypt, how about having some lore unlocks so people who like to read, hi, like me, can find this stuff? The crypt in Mortal Kombat 11 finally starts bringing some of that with the weapons chamber, where you can read the history of some of the items in there, including the skeletal head of one of the Kaiten. That was interesting. But for the most part, they still haven't embraced that lore as a reward as much as I would like. Anyway, I'm getting off topic from Mortal Kombat 9, which is the focus of this video, so I might as well narrow that focus. Kitana goes off in a huff in what I assume is a assassin lady's version of a timeout, where she fights the Earthrealmers, beating both of them. I guess it makes sense that she'd beat up Johnny Cage and Smoke, because they're the only ones around. We've lost Sonya and Jax, but it just doesn't do much for me. It's just another fight. However, Raiden's conversation with her leads her to follow the path of truth down towards the flesh pits. And now we get to the first fight that matters, the battle between friends. Kitana has almost always been around Jade, except when she was on a mission to assassinate Liu Kang. They are the BFF assassin bitches, and they have a good time killing people together, and I guess painting their nails, to the sounds of their shrieking, dying foes. They will hear the lamentations of your men and see them driven before them. Jade tells us, hey, the flesh pits are forbidden, just like Raiden has already said, and tries to stop Kitana from looking. She's trying to be the friend, acting out of common sense and trying to stop her close partner from doing something that she would consider very stupid. Hey, don't go drinking and driving. Hey, don't go to the place where they make monsters and dark sorcery happens. Well, Kitana's having none of it and defeats her friend. There is a long history here that makes the fight worth having and emotionally important, and it also is just a lot of fun to see friends struggle against each other. While there's not the stakes that one of them will kill the other, Kitana's story would come to an end if Jade were to win, but in a different way than the traditional, hey, they'll kill you. This would just instead end her face turn. Well, Kitana wins, and we get to go inside the flesh pits, which are frickin' nightmare fuel. I loved it. And we get introduced to Mileena in spectacular fashion. And Mileena in this version is batshit insane. I love what the voice actress has done with both characters, and how freaky Mileena is. And it just turns out to be an awesome fight that has a lot of narrative consequences. There's a perfect reason why they would fight each other. It's just great. That would have been a great boss chapter for me as well, except Shang Tsung comes in and it gets even better because Kitana has a great reason to want to pummel him after she has seemingly killed her cloned sister, if you want to use the term sister. And it was a great establishment for Kitana as a badass. It's a solid establishment for Mileena as vicious, scary, and is the reason for Kitana's defection. It's much more believable that this would be taken as a deep betrayal on Kitana's part than simply going, ooh, nice guy spared me. So we have a solid character-based reason for Kitana to do everything she does, and she still tries to take Shang Tsung in to her father, going, I'm sure my father's not involved in this, showing you the sort of way she's been raised and brainwashed into being near worshipful toward her father. And then you have Shao Kahn reveal, yes, Shang Tsung, you have done as I asked you. You have created for me a perfect daughter. Now go bring her to me, Kitana, you're now in prison. So this sets up our next chapter very well. It is overall 3 great fights and 3 great reasons for having those fights. This is probably one of the best chapters of the game, and it has introduced us to a very important fan favorite character in probably the best way they possibly could have done so, other than her winning her first fight. And even Mileena losing doesn't make her seem less threatening because of how memorable her opening was. At least not to me. How others felt about it varies. And coming off of a great chapter, it seems that we're doomed to have a mediocre one, because now we get Jade's chapter. And alright, there are some good parts to this chapter, and it's nice to play Jade, but seriously, no. The end of this is going to be painful, and I will I'll get to why in a moment. She goes, "Oh no, my friend has been betrayed. I should have been by your side and helped you, Katana. I'm going to go rescue you." And this leads us to the first of 3 thematically important fights. The first one is against Baraka, who is compared to a dog in his sort of animalistic loyalty, which is one of our first characterizations of Baraka in the game, beyond, say, perhaps his little ladder ending. So we finally get to learn what he is all about. He's chiding his underlings, he's more disciplined than the other Tarkatans, finally setting him apart from them. He's not just another Tarkatan that all our other Tarkatans are like. He is their paragon, he's disciplined, he's intelligent, and he accuses Jade of being disloyal. This is a battle about loyalties. You have the Tarkatans who are loyal to who beat them, meaning loyalty by force, and then you have Jade, who is loyal because of friendship. And this is thematically also important for our next battle, loyalty based on honor versus loyalty based on friendship. So again, the battle between Shiva and Jade here is important to what's going on, both in terms of it's the next step to get what the character wants, rescuing Katana, we have our goal, and it's important as Jade is faced with yet another argument that she would have had once upon a time of be loyal out of honor. Now I'm choosing friendship above honor. The character's being faced with different versions of loyalty and different forms of conflict based on her sole motivating factor. Excellent choice there. And then she gets to Kitana and for some reason can't rescue her. This is where the chapter just goes absolutely silly. Why? Why can she not save Kitana there? Why does she have to go to the Earthrealmers for help? She could have rescued her, yet they have the entire time to have a conversation and say, "I'm sorry," and to have Jade go off and call the boys over. I mean, no. What was the point of the first 2 fights if we just undo it? Is Jade too stupid to lift up the glowy hula hoop? Does it have to be lifted up by a dude? I don't know. It's just, I feel the headache coming on just thinking about it. There was no reason for that whatsoever. None at all. But she goes out there and we have another thematically important fight with Melina. This time the question of loyalty. So again, there's thematic value here, but there was no reason for Jade to run away in the first place. And then we have the boss battle between Jade and the Earthrealmers, and it doesn't matter. There was no reason to have that boss battle. They could have just talked it out, and it was a way to end the chapter on a dud. So there were some good parts of this chapter. The theme was good. It should have played with that more. But there was such stupidity in the construction of the narrative that forces it in a direction it shouldn't have gone that I just can't give this chapter any form of stamp of approval. No. Be consistent with your rules. No. Bad chapter. Oh well. We get to actually what I think is probably the best chapter of the game and the very best chapter of the second arc of this story. The Kung Lao chapter. The Shaolin monks team up again to go off and rescue Kitana. So at the very least, the basis for their adventure makes some sense, and it raises the stakes. And it also calls back fond memories some people have of the Shaolin monks. I wasn't a fan of the Shaolin monks game, but it's a treat for the others who did to have these two together again and kicking all kinds of ass. And the fight is obviously very important to Kung Lao. This is the monster that killed his ancestor. Goro defeated the great Kung Lao. This is also unknown to Kung Lao, the being that killed him in another life, since this Kung Lao doesn't realize he's a reincarnation of the great Kung Lao. And you also have the fact that Goro is after Liu Kang, not this would-be misfit who's another Shaolin monk. No, he wants the Shaolin monk, and Liu Kang has already beaten this monster. So if you have Kung Lao ever stepping out of Liu Kang's shadow and surpassing him, which is Kung Lao's dream, he's got to first beat this challenge. So this is why Goro is a great fight to start this off. Well, he doesn't really start it off per se. There is one other fight in there, the revelation of new Noob Saibot, who is the old Sub-Zero now raised as a Spectre, which is a character that on some level is a nice parallel of Scorpion. You have a ninja who's received supernatural powers after his death. This one is everything that Scorpion at his best is not. And Noob Saibot is another fan favorite, just because of how his powers work, how he looks, and the history of the character. So yes, it's nice to have him come back, but there's no reason he had to appear here and couldn't have had a much grander introduction. So I really think that this use of him was rather weak. Still, it's something. So look at it this way. You have Kung Lao first fighting some random guy that he doesn't really have a connection to. He just goes, well, you look familiar, and beats him, but that's not special. And then he has to rise up to meet Goro. He is now starting off less than Liu Kang. Then he must rise to Liu Kang's level by facing off and beating Goro. And in the next fight, you're going to see him surpass Liu Kang's level. So this sort of story arc does have a point. It fits into a wider character arc, even though after defeating the Shokan and showing, oh, well, we don't have a princess to rescue here, she's in another castle, we get to go down to the Colosseum where Kitana's being held and Johnny Cage is getting his ass kicked by Ermac. Ermac beats him, and this leaves Earthrealm in a bit of a pickle. But first, I'd like to pause here and point out that Shao Kahn does not give the command for Johnny Cage to be finished. Why? Clearly, that's supposed to be some sort of tradition that if you lose in Mortal Kombat, you're supposed to get to finish him. But the story has displayed this rule so inconsistently that it's frustrating. I want to scream no at the top of my lungs, from the top of a building, or the front of a boat like it's the Titanic, or something. Just, please, be consistent with the rules of your world. Please, goodness gracious, goodness gracious, goodness gracious, mamma mia. But now that I've calmed down from that, let's get to the awesome part. Because you have Shao Kahn demanding that Raiden send forth his next champion, and Liu Kang admits, I can't be the one to win, even as he's freeing Kitana. Well, Kung Lao starts to step forward and then stops, showing that he has gotten a better appreciation of humility. His old impetuous nature is now being held back by the experience of his loss, and he goes, I will respectfully step back. And then he looks to Raiden, and Raiden gives him that, all right, son, it's time. And Raiden tells him, it's time. So, it's time. And Kung Lao steps forward and gets hit with probably the worst challenge you could ever get hit with. The Deadly Alliance. The very people that destroy Liu Kang. So you have a character who's matched the actions of Liu Kang having to face the one challenge Liu Kang in the alternate universe, or the previous universe, could never defeat. And he awesomely does it with flair. I'm screaming at that point the first time I played. I was like, yes, Kung Lao, finally! And then you have Kintaro come out, and again, Kung Lao just beats the ever-living shit out of him. And you have this glorious moment where Liu Kang gets to see Kung Lao living his dream. Kung Lao is taking off his helmet to the booing crowd. He's showing his character flair while at the same time finally being the chosen one. Finally stepping out of Liu Kang's shadow. This is everything he could have dreamed it could be. Rip. He is killed in Mortal Kombat fashion by Shao Kahn. Mortal Kombat is something of a crapsack universe. Bad things happen to heroic characters. Successes turn into tragedies, and this thematically works so well. You get that moment of yes, and then you get that moment of oh no. It's just a fantastic ending to the chapter, which brings up our final fight with Liu Kang and Shao Kahn that sees Shao Kahn seemingly killed and history put back on course. Unfortunately, Raiden realizes this isn't good because of that amulet, and that's going to move us into the third and final section of the story, which we'll cover in yet another podcast episode, which should come along very shortly. But I think you can see a few of the common notes that I had from the first one proving themselves here. Your fights need to have a reason to exist. your story should build upon the relations that came before, and even if this is an alternate universe, callbacks and nostalgia can be useful. Stories that are driven by character motivations or that tell us something about the character of the world are much richer than just here's a fight, moving to the next fight, here's a fight, moving to the next fight. This is something that Mortal Kombat X builds upon in the most wonderful of ways, but Mortal Kombat 9 lays the groundwork for, stepping things up from Mortal Kombat vs. DC. Anyway, before we close out on this, I want to talk about what the fatalities in the game can tell us about the characters themselves. Generally speaking, the fatalities in Mortal Kombat are built for one of three purposes. One, it shows us the logical extreme of a character's power. You get to see what horrific and sometimes creative things they can do with a power that is obviously dangerous, taking things to their logical extreme. Two, they're meant to be funny or just gross out. They're meant to entertain. Or three, they can actually tell us something about the character's personality. And I find that fatalities that do all three are the best fatalities, where ones that just handle one of those notes, or only two, operate the lower and middle categories of that hierarchy. Let's take a look at some of what I mean and how fatalities themselves become a tool of narrative and of the artistic team for telling us things about these characters. And as a game that is this violent, I think Mortal Kombat is at its best when it uses that violence as a tool for its storytelling. There are fatalities that tell us something about the character's personality, that show us the extent of their powers, or that are simply meant to entertain. And occasionally, a successful fatality can do all three, including perhaps even a callback. Melina's fatality, where she throws her size into her opponent, goes up to them, moans, and then bites off their head, is probably one of the best examples of a fatality that checks almost every one of these boxes. Perhaps I would even go with every one of which. It shows us something about her character. It's very Melina. She is a interplay of sex and violence. It's downright deranged that someone would basically come onto the person they're murdering, then rip their face off and eat it. It's showing her Tarkatan heritage, her sultriness, all at once. And it's just solid. It informs us as to what kind of person she is and how she kills, and it shows us the uses of her powers. Besides Baraka, no one else could really do something like this. It's Melina. I want to point out that fatalities can work out as a great establishing character moment. When you're introduced to characters in shows or in books, we often determine who they are by what they do. This is called indirect characterization. Yes, direct characterization, telling instead of showing, can I suppose teach us some things, but it's always weaker than indirect characterization. A sniper who has the enemy in his crosshairs and hesitates briefly when they see that a man has stopped to talk to his significant other and has to work himself up to finally shooting the man once he is clear of any potential collateral damage, shows us a lot about his character, versus the sniper that has the enemy in his crosshairs while that guy has his newborn son in his hands, grins a little about traumatizing that kid, and then pulls the trigger. Or aims the crosshairs so he gets them both at the same time. It is completely different. We still have a man shooting someone else, but what it shows us about the character couldn't be further from the other. Melina here displays her madness, displays her violent Tarkatan nature, and displays the fact that she is someone who would interplay sex with virtually everything she does. Scorpion's fatality, where he kicks his enemy through the portal after wrapping his chain around their neck, and sending them through the Neatherrealm to be burned to a crisp skeleton, which comes through another portal above his head, is both a creative use of Scorpion's powers and embodies his nature as an anti-heroic avenger. This is a 90s anti-hero in a nutshell. There's no one else who's going to bring vengeance to these people, so he'll do it himself. And hanging is an execution-style killing, in a way evoking this type of judicious or extrajudicious energy. This could also be extremely uncomfortable since a lot of people who were executed outside the law were also hung, and it mixes well with the morally muddled nature of Scorpion, particularly if he's just killed a good guy this way. Scorpion's whole fire-breathing skull thing also demonstrates his nature as a revenant and the consuming nature of vengeance as a flame. Fire imagery is often associated with vengeance in literature, and thus Scorpion as the fire ninja, literally consuming his opponents in the flames of vengeance, really fits. So all of this fire stuff with Scorpion is symbolically ties into him. So even his fatalities for the most part fit, except for the one where he's cutting them apart, and it's just excessive, and while cool, doesn't really do anything for his character or even seem to wow me considering the lengths that some of these fatalities can go to. It's just kind of a meh, it's there. Sub-Zero does his patented spine rip and uses his powers in a fun way to do that, but beyond that I don't think these moves do much more than call back and show his ice powers, whereas Cyber Sub-Zero's powers demonstrate how he has merged his ninja skills with the benefits of technology, demonstrating what kind of person he has become. It fits nicely while still being Sub-Zero. Jax's fatality, where he pounds his opponent to the ground and then soccer kicks the head, is a lot of fun and is very Jax. It's brute force, and it channels Jax's love of sports, which becomes a recurring theme in some of his other moves as well. He fights like a wrestler, and he does the whole baseball fatality in Mortal Kombat 11. It's very Jax, especially compared to his other fatality, which is more, it's there. Liu Kang's 1-inch fire punch honors where he came from, Bruce Lee, and of course bringing back the dragon thing ties Liu Kang to fire, ties him to the Mortal Kombat dragon. It just overall works for him. Quan Chi's leg fatality has the advantage of both being brutal and saying something about him. While most of the time Quan Chi speaks like he's very enlightened, educated, and cultured, this fatality is so brutal and over the top and savage, employing none of his sorcery or craft or guile, that it shows us that behind all of that finery, he's just a monster. He's just a beast. He's the demon he always was. The culture is an illusion. Everything about him is an illusion. He's a deceiver who will destroy you. In addition to being a nice callback, so yay team there. Ermac's telekinesis fatality shows us the logical extent of his powers, which is nice and fun, but the growing one, well, there's no sign that he grows in any of his other moves. I don't know why we went with that one. It's just more like, ha ha ha, that's funny. Same thing for Shiva's. It's like, haha, that's funny, but this doesn't tell us anything about you. And the sense of humor she displays in those fatalities is not present anywhere else in her story or her ladder. So I'm assuming that's not really a part of her personality, that's just something we did for the ha-has. Kung Lao's kills seem very vicious, and I thought very out of character for him until I stopped and looked at the weapons that Shaolin used in real life and how they're not truly pacifist, they're non-violent. They don't look for a fight, but they'll freaking kill you if you come and mess with them. That's where their fighting style comes from, and a lot of their weapons are lethal and somewhat showy. I suppose because if you scare someone into not messing with you, you have to do less damage. Thus, the overly gory methods that Kung Lao uses are actually very Shaolin in nature. Okay, well, I suppose you could make that argument. It fits rather well for him, and it lets us show you all the horrible things he can do with that hat, nightmarishly so. Shang Tsung's move where he possesses the target and makes them kill themselves, oh, very Shang Tsung. And it just displays how horrible he is down to the core, whereas the other one is a Joker callback that, while fun, doesn't really show us anything about him, and I think is a bit of a blowout. In a story and video game where violence is one of your key tools, I argue that you should use violence as a key part of storytelling. Kill characters in ways that show us something about the killer. Show us their personality. Show us what they can do. Show us who they are. Johnny Cage's fatality, where he basically gives them the award, shoving it into their body, is very Johnny Cage. Whereas the one before that, the other fatality, it's just violence because it's Mortal Kombat. A good fighting game will show you who this character is through their actions, through how they fight. Like a good wrestler in WWE or All Japan or AEW or wherever. Some people can tell a story with their bodies. And I think Mortal Kombat should consider emphasizing that with their characters. And indeed, with Mortal Kombat X and eventually Mortal Kombat 11, you'll see they do so. That the fatalities become even more emblematic of the character's personalities and tell us something about the character at the same time while enjoying how this character might kill even their loved ones. Have a good time! Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one, and it gives you some look into, some insight, I should say, into how I view Mortal Kombat and how the fighting genre should take lessons from this game, both in what to do and what not to do and what it could do in the future. I wish you all a wonderful day and take care.